Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed and on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 797. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about breweries and bays, wineries and whales, hikes and hobbits as we go to Wellington, New Zealand.
I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about Wellington. I'd like to welcome to the show Kate from kateabroad.com, who's come to talk to us about Wellington, New Zealand. Kate, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris.
And Kate, what is your connection with Wellington?
So I lived in Wellington for 6 years until very recently. First moved there as a brand new university student and ended up living and working there for 6 years.
And you're originally from New Zealand, as we established before we started recording?
Yes, I am. So I'm from Hamilton, which is about 6 hours drive north of Wellington. And so, moved to Wellington from Hamilton at 17.
Excellent. Excellent. And why should someone go to Wellington, New Zealand?
So Wellington, the capital city of New Zealand, but highly underrated. It's got the nickname now of coolest little capital, and it really is because you've got so much outdoorsy things that you can do there. It's based around the Wellington Harbour, but also you've got mountains around, lots of hikes, things like that. But it's got also a bit of a hipster reputation, which you definitely find if you go for a walk down Cuba Street. But that means there's a really strong foodie culture and based around the arts as well. It's the home of Peter Jackson of Lord of the Rings. There's lots of Lord of the Rings scenes around Wellington that you can go and visit. And you can also see the workshop where all the movie magic is made.
Excellent. And what kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
Sure. So I'd recommend that if you're spending about a week in Wellington, you base yourself around a suburb or an area for the first few days and then venture out of the city for some short trips. So one of my favourite areas in Wellington is Ara Valley. It's very much got that kind of hipster vibe. You'll find things like an old video store there. There's a great walk up the Pole Hill Reserve where you can get spectacular views of the city, better than Mount Vic, which is recommended in a lot of tourist guidebooks. And great cafes and things in the area as well. There's Garage Project, which is a craft beer brewery that literally did start at an old service station and is still there now. You can go and do tasting flights and things like that.
Can you get an oil change at the same time?
Not anymore.
Okay. And when you say we should stay there, are you recommending any particular hotel, Airbnb, hostel?
So I think if you're going for a hotel, best to stay in the central city around Lambton Quay area.
Okay.
There's a newly opened one, Doubletree by Hilton. And while it sounds Hilton chain, it's in a beautiful old heritage building and they give you free cookies on arrival.
Well, the free cookies are always at Doubletree, but their properties are not all equally interesting. So
Yeah. There are a lot of Airbnbs spread around the city as well, which is a good, cheaper option because there aren't many hostels.
Okay.
So looking at areas like Ara Valley is really good, or Oriental Bay if you're looking for a nicer Airbnb with some waterfront views.
Excellent. What else are we going to do while we're there?
in Arrow Valley. The walks around there's some great shops on Arrow Street, and the craft beer tasting. Rita is one of the best restaurants in Wellington to get into. It is a bit of a pain to get a booking because it's often very full, but they do incredible food. It's very kind of modern New Zealand cuisine with lots of local produce, European influences.
And I don't know that I know modern New Zealand cuisine.
Fair point. So it is very influenced by the British cuisine.
Okay. Well, we won't hold that against it, but
New Zealand was a colony, but bringing in some more of the Asian fusion influences because of the part of world that we're in, and local produce. So New Zealand obviously does great wine, but there's lots of kind of fruit orchards around the Hawke's Bay area and Kapiti Coast to get produce from. Lots of seafood, especially as well, and that links to the traditional Māori cuisine with kai moana seafood.
Okay. Got it. Excellent. Anything else in the Arrow Valley that we should talk about? You say there are lots of cute little shops. You got a favorite?
Ooh. For shopping, personally, I would actually go Old Bank Arcade on Lambton Quay rather than to Arrow Valley.
Okay.
But Arrow Valley has more of the kind of, you'll find antiques, you'll find, the video store, lots of kind of thrift shops, things like that.
Got it. Well, that is, I think, the second time that you have taken us down to the area around Old Bank, the neighborhood there. Should we go there next, or where are we going next?
So Lambton Quay and Willis Street are kind of called the Golden Mile in Wellington because that's where a lot of the city's businesses are. It's the CBD, but there's also a lot of food and shops around there. So you'll find a mix of Lambton Quay and Willis Street have a lot of chain stores, but if you go into Old Bank Arcade, which is literally the Old Bank Heritage Building, which has got all the beautiful mosaic tiling on the floor, old wooden balustrades, that sort of thing. You'll find some more local boutiques. My favourite is Ruby in there, women's clothing. But there's a whole range from homewares, things like that. And a little cafe, Smith the Grocer, as well, which does great brownies.
Good to know. Okay. Well, and just a couple translation from English to English here. So when you talk about Lambton Quay, that's Quay, Quay, the British quay, which is dock or pier, usually. So we're down by the water.
Yes, so this street is actually where the waterline used to be back in the 1800s, and everything further closer to the water from there, that you're about 2 blocks off the water, is reclaimed land.
Okay. Excellent. And then you mentioned the Old Bank being a heritage building. We would say that would be a historic building, but we have a slightly different system for that. Cool. Excellent.
As much as heritage gets in a country that's about 200 years old.
Yeah, exactly. Where to next?
Sure. So I think Oriental Bay is a great area to base yourself around. It's a city beach, so very popular on a nice day. Wellington weather can be very variable, and it can be cold and dark for a big chunk of the year. So as soon as we get a beautiful sunny day in November, you'll find everybody in Wellington flocks to Oriental Bay. So and there you've got a whole range of waterfront cafes. Wellingtonians love brunch, and some of the best spots are down by Oriental Bay. So I love Cohen's Cafe, which has big windows you can look out over the water. It's down by the yacht club as well. And also Beach Babylon is really good down there.
Beach Babylon? Okay. We have a musical here that recently closed called Beach Babylon, so I have the wrong mental image when you say that.
Yeah, no, think kind of laid back cafe, milkshakes, chips by the beach kind of thing.
Okay. Well, and you mentioned that much of the year the weather might be off-putting. Let's just say, when would you recommend people come?
Yeah, so it's called Windy Wellington, but I haven't personally been to Chicago, but I think it would compete. So I think definitely come in summer. So summer in New Zealand is December, January, February. It starts getting nice around November, and that stretches to about Easter. So definitely come in that period, and you'll be able to make the most of swimming, kayaking. A lot of the hikes, some of them aren't accessible in the middle of winter just because of river levels, mud, things like that. So definitely that kind of between Christmas and Easter is ideal.
Well, and you say that it's not as good. I wouldn't say the weather there gets bad, though, in the sense of like cold and snowy or things like that. I think I was there in June and it was some rain, but that was about it.
Yes, it snowed once in my 6 years of Wellington, and it was, the lightest snow you've ever seen. I think we got the Bureau of Meteorology people out to say, yes, that was actually snow. It wasn't just a bit of hail. We all got very excited about it.
Excellent. And so we're at Oriental Bay. We're having our brunch.
Yeah, so from Oriental Bay after brunch, you can hire kayaks and kayak around the harbour. So you can do that either from Queen's Wharf, which is just off Lambton Quay, or from Oriental Bay and go back and forth between the two, or further around the headland from Oriental Bay.
And they're set up that if I kayak, I can leave the kayak if I do a one-way and get back and all that?
You can between Oriental Bay and Queen's Wharf,
Okay.
but not if you go further afield.
Got it.
There's also bikes that you can hire. There's these croc bikes that have taken off. They kind of look like tuk-tuks, except there's nobody driving it, so it gets a bit chaotic when you get groups of teenagers on them, but a bit of fun to kind of go around the bays. So when I say the bays, the Wellington coastline goes for about 50 kilometres from Queen's Wharf in the central city right around to a Whero Bay on the south coast, and that faces over Cook Strait to the South Island. So you can run, bike, walk any section of that. And it also runs north to the Hutt, which is an extension of Wellington in the Hutt River Valley. But that section from the city to the Hutt is not really walkable.
Okay. Well, and you said croc bikes, and that is an expression that I didn't know at all. We would call them bicycle surreys. So unlike a pedicab, there's no one in the there's no back. There's no one in the back and somebody in the front, but you're sitting next to each other in 2 or 4 people and then pedaling to go where you want.
Yeah, I've never heard that expression.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's just what I've seen them called, exactly the same thing. So crocodile bikes are a new one to me. So excellent. So we've got our croc bike. We were biking around the harbor. And then where are we going to, or what are we doing next?
So one of the things that everyone does recommend in Wellington is climbing Mount Vic. So Wellington is very hilly.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to walk anywhere that's further than 2 blocks back from the water, you'll be climbing hills.
Mm-hmm.
So you get very fat living there. So Mount Vic is the most accessible hill to climb. It's not really a mount, it's just called that. And it's about kind of 20 to 30 minutes to the summit from Oriental Bay, and you get beautiful views all across the bay.
Got it. And this is the mountain that was named after Queen Vic?
Yes.
So it's Mount Victoria?
Mount Victoria, yep.
Got it.
And it's part of a bigger skyline walkway that kind of connects the whole city. So you can walk from Mount Victoria all the way to the south coast or up into the hills by the eastern suburbs.
Okay.
So doing a bigger chunk of that walk is a great option if you've got a few days there and want to go for a longer hike.
Got it.
And so in Oriental Bay, you've got to have fish and chips on the beach if you're there at dinner time.
Okay.
So my favourite place to go is the Chippery on Marjoribank Street. And you get your fish and chips in your newspaper or your paper box and take it down and eat it by the beach. Or there's also some really cute boat sheds in Oriental Bay that you can climb on top of. Great place to get a photo. We've got the really bright primary colours painted up there with the little boats in the background. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of the closest beach area to the city. But from there, you're really close also to Te Papa, which is the National Museum, and absolutely worth spending half a day or even a full day at.
Yes,
I'd
I
recommend
agree.
that over, all of the other museums in Wellington. I'd say you could skip those, go to Te Papa, take your time there. The Scale of Our War exhibit that was designed by Peter Jackson and Weta Workshop, the team behind Avatar and Lord of the Rings and things, is incredible. You've got these massive scale models, and it's about Gallipoli, which is the main battle in World War One that New Zealand soldiers were involved in.
So for those who are not familiar, Gallipoli being a peninsula in Turkey and a place where the Amateur Traveler Turkey trip will be going in September. So if you happen to have some friends from one of the Anzac countries, they might appreciate that.
Very significant to Australians and New Zealanders.
Right, exactly. And that's in Te Papa?
Yes, so the exhibit is in Te Papa.
Is that new then, a new exhibit?
No, so it's been there for about 2 years now, and I believe it's continuing through to 2025.
Got it. That would count as new. It's been there since I was in Te Papa. Got it. Well, and I recall that was a good museum for an introduction into the local Maori culture as well.
Absolutely. So there's a lot there on the history of New Zealand, right from when the Māori first arrived to New Zealand through their history, and then when the European settlers arrived, the Māori land wars, New Zealand land wars, and the history since then, including the Treaty of Waitangi between the Māori and the Europeans in New Zealand. So a great way to get introduced to that. You can see things like a Māori waka, which is the canoes that they arrived to New Zealand in hundreds of years ago, the feather cloaks, things like that, to really get a sense of the history of New Zealand and the Māori culture.
Excellent. Yeah, it's also a pretty building. I thought it was beautiful architecturally in terms of how they'd put some of that together.
It is, and there's some kind of cute little gardens that you can find your way around to as well that face onto the waterfront. There's a exhibit there that's kind of geological as well that I loved as a kid and would be good if you're taking kids to Wellington. And it's all about the earthquakes that are really prevalent in Wellington because Wellington is on a fault line, and so you get earthquakes a lot. And so you can go in the little mini house that shakes and things like that and learn about why do we have all of this in New Zealand and why there's so many earthquakes in the country.
Okay.
Ah, bon chien. Bonjour, je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore. And this is Punti. He's helping us find truffles under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. Maybe for tomorrow's cooking class? We call it semi-heure. Parfait. Semi-o'clock. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. No, Punti. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel. Explore.
Yeah, so that's Te Papa, and then working your way further around the waterfront, there's Circa Theatre. Definitely recommend going to a theatre show in Wellington. There's a huge arts scene there, partly because we have things like the Toi Whakaari, which is the National Performing Arts and Drama School, is based in Wellington, so really a creative hub for New Zealand, and the two main theatres are Bats and Circa. So Circa being on the waterfront and Bats is on Kent Terrace, just a few streets away. So definitely recommend catching a show there while you're in the city.
And these are live theatre?
Yes, live theatre. Although the movie scene in Wellington is also really big since Lord of the Rings. That really made it take off.
Okay.
So there is the theatre where the Lord of the Rings premieres were held, which is Empire Cinema it's at the end of Courtney Place, which is also close to Oriental Bay, which is a kind of restored heritage building as well. And if you want to see a movie, if it's a bad day or something like that, then that's definitely the place to go.
And the Empire Cinema and Eatery.
Yes. So they do have a bar inside there as well, which is really good for pre-movie cocktail, something like that.
Okay. Got it. Well, you've been teasing us a bit with Weta and with Peter Jackson and Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Are you going to keep teasing me, or are you going to talk about where we can see more about that?
Yeah, so a couple of places for that. You can actually do Lord of the Rings tours from Wellington, where they'll take you to a lot of the different places where they were shooting the show in the city. So I did one of those myself when I was younger. I have a brother who's a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and you can go on the side of Mount Vic. There's a spot where they take the photos where the hobbits are running in the woods, and you can get the giant perspective and see how the films were shot to make the hobbits look little and the other characters look much taller.
Right.
And then I'll speak a bit more about the Pūtangirua Pinnacles. It's one of the famous sites from Lord of the Rings and is kind of a day trip from Wellington. Definitely worth going to, and there's a few other things around there. But the real destination for that is Weta Workshop. So that is on the Miramar Peninsula, one of the suburbs of Wellington. And on the drive there, you'll see this giant Wellywood sign in the hills.
I don't remember that. Okay.
Yeah, bit of a knockoff of Hollywood.
Okay.
But one of the letters looks like it's being blown away. It's very on theme for Wellington. Yeah, so you can go to Weta Workshop and do a tour there is the best way to see it, and they show you a lot of the actual props and things from the movies they've done. So they've done Lord of the Rings, they've done Avatar, they've done quite a few others since then as well. And they have things like the masks that the orcs wore, and you can see how they did the makeup and all of those different things. So they do kind of adult tours and more kids tours that have sort of painting and things like that involved as well.
Well, and they've been involved in more projects than I realized, even to the recent Stranger Things on Netflix and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as someone who may or may not have known nerds who quizzed each other during freshman year of high school with Lord of the Rings trivia, for someone like that, hypothetically, it could be a quite enjoyable tour.
Yeah, I think it's great for even if you're not into those particular movies. It's very
Right.
much kind of
Behind the
behind the
curtain.
scenes.
Exactly.
Amazing to see how they actually did it all and make people look like all of these creatures in the movies. And they really take you in depth. I mean, I've done things like the Universal Studios tours, and it's much more kind of personal, much smaller groups, of course, things like that. And so you really learn a lot.
Excellent. Where to next?
I say, if you're going to Weta Workshop, I'd recommend spending a day over in the Miramar area.
Okay.
So around there, yes, there's Weta Workshop, but there's also lots of kind of little groupings of town centres along the peninsula. So I really like Seatoon, which has got some great cafes. You can walk all the way around the peninsula and get to Scorchorama is a great cafe that's on the beach by Scorching Bay.
Okay.
And you can do things like stand-up paddleboarding around there, lots of sort of water-based activities. Further around from there, you can actually do surf lessons, which Wellington is not known for its surf. But if you're looking for a really gentle introduction to surfing, then it's a great place to do it. If you're later heading north in New Zealand and want to hit up the waves in Raglan or something like that, get some experience under your belt before you get there,
Okay.
you can give Wellington surfing a try.
Well, and you're in a sheltered area from here because we're kind of looking into the bay, and I don't remember what the name of the bay is that Wellington's on. So we're not quite out with the big breakers, I would assume.
No, so you can do a little bit of surfing on the Miramar Peninsula, but at the south end where it
Okay.
is Lyell Bay Beach, that faces out to the Cook Strait,
Yeah.
that's where you'll find more actual surfers congregating, and further around the coast again into Island Bay is more of a break.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, so that's probably Miramar Peninsula. Then I think definitely making the trip out to the Putangirewa Pinnacles. It was the Path of the Dead, I believe it's called, in Lord of the Rings, where they go into the mountains and it's surrounded by these huge rocky cliffs. So that you can drive out to. It's about a 2-hour drive from Wellington to get to the Pinnacles. And from the Pinnacles campsite, you can walk up either to a lookout platform or in amongst the rocks, which is a really great photo spot. I feel like you're kind of a world away from the city there. And while you're out that way, definitely worth seeing the Pink Arrow Lighthouse. That's just this old style red and white striped lighthouse that faces out to the south coast. And you take these hugely steep stairs up to it, holding on to this one railing, squeezing past everyone. It's very dramatic. And it feels very edge of the world because you're just facing out to Cook Strait. You might see South Island on a good day, but also out to kind of Pacific Ocean, south coast there, in a very remote area. But they're also home to a seal colony, which is one of the other reasons to go out there. So there's giant grey seals. Don't approach. We get that problem with tourists sometimes. But yeah, that's a really cool reason to go out and visit there. So there's the lighthouse, there's the pinnacles, there's the seal colony, and there's the lake ferry area, which is great for cycling as well. And there's an old pub there which you can stay the night at or just have a meal at, which is, got really good food, just kind of pub classics, things that you'll find in New Zealand, sausages and mashed potato, pies, fish and chips, that sort of stuff, but done well.
Okay. And would you do that on the same trip? It looks like that's kind of halfway out to the Pinnacles.
We did do it on the same trip and would definitely recommend it because the lighthouse is the furthest point and then there's the Pinnacles, which is a bit further back, and you pass through Lake Ferry on the way.
Right.
Yeah, so definitely all on one trip.
Okay. Well, and you mentioned the lighthouse being the southernmost point of the North Island,
Yes.
if I'm getting that correct.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Which is why you can sometimes see the South Island from there
Right.
on a
Right.
good day.
Although the South Island from there is actually west rather than south. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's like very much on the edge, and so you get kind of 180-degree views in either direction.
Right, right. Well, so we've done a show on the northern part of the North Island, and now we're in the southern part of the North Island. And we've also got, of course, shows on the southern part of the South Island and vice versa. But
Usually, I just got to do the northern part of the South Island, which is very nice as well. The
Right.
Marlborough region, the sounds and the wineries.
exactly. Cool. Any other side trips like that we should take, as long as we're out of the city?
Wairarapa region, definitely. So Wairarapa is a really foodie area, but known for its wineries. So I'd recommend you can take the train as far as Featherston, but better to drive so you've got some kind of flexibility out there. But you drive north from Wellington, it's about an hour and a half over the Remataka Ranges, which can get pretty windy. So you ideally want to go in daylight on a good day. But you get to Featherston, which is this cute little town. It's got this shop called Say Cheese, which does a whole lot of locally made or New Zealand made cheeses. They do amazing toasties, things like that. So definitely worth a stop off.
Okay, so you're going to have to explain what a toasty is, because that's again something that doesn't translate.
Okay.
I know what it is, but
It's like a grilled cheese, but with nicer cheese in it.
upscale grilled cheese.
Yeah, it's grilled cheese, but often with more fillings in it.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, so you might get tomatoes or mushrooms or things like that.
Excellent.
So what I would absolutely recommend doing is picking up some cheese there, and then you kind of put together the pieces of a platter as you go into Martinborough, and then end up with wine in a platter at the end of your day. So Say Cheese in Featherston, there's also some cute bookshops around there and antique shops as well. And then it's just a few minutes drive from Featherston to Martinborough, which is the main area in the Wairarapa region. And there's at least 30 wineries around Martinborough that you can visit. And they all do tastings. A lot of them do food as well. And all of them are around Martinborough within walking distance, the main ones. So you can either hire a bike or just walk between the wineries. And it's very common to see big groups of people on the side of the road walking around with their wine. So you don't have to worry about a designated driver. Just walk everywhere.
And are there particular wineries that are your favorite?
Yeah, so Poppies I really like for their food. They do amazing platters and also a good rosé. They're probably the most kind of popular one in the area. Then there's Palliser Estate, which is kind of on the western edge of Martinborough, and they do the sparkling wines. They're kind of the most high-end one in the area. And then there's lots of smaller ones that are just kind of very low-key, mum and dad kind of operations. They do a smaller range of wine usually, and you get the owners talking you through their range as you do your tasting. You get to try whatever the latest vintage is, whatever their favourite is, and you can buy bottles as you go. So like Atarangi is a good one of the smaller wineries. There's Cambridge Road as well, which is really good.
Okay.
It's mostly wine around that area, but there are two places I think that do olive oil tastings now.
Okay.
Olivo is really good. And there's kind of general stores in Martinborough that do they kind of gather a lot of the local producers, so you can buy your food and more wine if needed there.
Okay.
Yeah, so great day or overnight trip from Wellington.
Got it.
There's some really award-winning restaurants out that way as well. So Union Square in Martinborough is really good, and it's called Grey Swan in Greytown. They're both sort of elevated pub style food.
Okay. That sounds like a contradiction in terms to me, but
It is. It's a very Kiwi thing.
fancy spotted dick sounds like an odd thing to do here. So what does elevated pub food mean?
So I think in Australia and New Zealand, pub food is kind of classic dishes like pies and sausages and
Sure.
fish and chips chops and schnitzels and things like that, steaks, that sort of stuff, burgers. But this is just done really well with local ingredients, really fresh produce, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's Wairarapa. There's a few other things out there which are quite interesting as well. So there's Stonehenge Aotearoa. So we have a New Zealand Stonehenge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So it's based off the UK one, but it is kind of more of a modern art installation, and so
Got
it's
it.
not
Okay.
it's not old. It's new
It's not
blocks
a
of
Maori
concrete
thing or something like that. Okay.
Yeah,
But yours is all fixed up. It's not all broken down like the
yeah. Ours
thing-
looks very
the English
new. But you can do stargazing things out there, so it's like a dark sky, not an official dark sky reserve, but there's very little light pollution out in that area. And so I believe it's the same people who operate the Stonehenge do stargazing at night. So you can kind of go and look through the telescope and take in the Southern Cross, which is the constellation on the New Zealand flag, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Learn all of the constellations I don't know that I don't get to see when I'm not in the southern sky. Yeah.
Yeah. There's also a cycle trail that runs basically from Wellington City right out to the Wairarapa, and it's over 100 kilometres. It's called the Rimataka Cycle Trail. So if you're into mountain biking or even just general cycling, it's not road, but it's not rough mountain biking for most of it. And that's a really good option. So you can do it as kind of a 2 or 3 day trip to do the whole thing,
Okay.
or just jump on parts of it as you go.
And are there normal places that people stay in the trip? I see that there's planning guides and things for that, but are there places that you would recommend along the route?
Not personally.
Okay.
I haven't done the whole thing. I've just done sections of it around the heart. So, yeah, I think not anywhere I could personally recommend there.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
If you are heading to Wairarapa, though, would recommend an Airbnb in Martinborough. There's a lot of sort of holiday homes of Wellingtonians out there that get rented out as Airbnbs that are quite nice.
Okay. Got it. Any other side trips we want to talk to or anything else we want to do while we're out in this area?
So in that area, I think winery tours, the Stonehenge, stargazing, fish, so that's probably the main things.
Okay.
But I would also recommend a side trip to the Kapiti Coast. That's on a train line from Wellington, so that's super convenient. You can jump on at Wellington Station and jump on and off at any point as you go. So a couple of things to do out there. You can take the ferry over to Kapiti Island. It is kind of privately chartered, so you have to book away in advance. But it's a nature and scientific reserve. So they do, I believe they have kiwis out there now.
And kiwi the bird, not kiwi the people who grew up in New Zealand.
Yes, and not kiwi the fruit either.
And not kiwi the fruit. That's true.
Yeah, kiwi the small birds you can see out there. You can kind of do a glamping thing overnight on Kapiti Island, which is quite nice. There's whale watching tours in that area, although I would say with whale watching in Wellington, sometimes they just come into the harbour.
Yeah.
So
okay.
you might be walking around Wellington waterfront and see a huge crowd of people and they're all trying to take photos of a whale in the harbour. A few years back we had to cancel some New Year fireworks because there was a whale in the harbour and nobody knew how it would react.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, so you can do whale watching tours, Kapiti Coastway. There's a walkway that's been put in recent years, which is called the Paikakariki Escarpment Track.
Every time you say something, and I think I've got to Google this and put it in the show notes, I just have to laugh at some of the Maori words because that one I may have you mail to me. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I can give you a list. Yeah, so that's a 10K track from Paikakariki to Pukurua Bay. Which is really cool. It's on the side of the cliff, basically, and they've got suspension bridges and all of that, so you get beautiful views out to Kapiti Island. Really popular thing to do on a nice day.
It looks beautiful.
It is. It's really nice. If you get a windy day, the suspension bridges can be a bit of a thrill ride.
I could well imagine.
There's lots of good food that's popping up in the Kapiti Coast as well.
Okay.
So there's Salt and Wood Collective, which is doing sort of American barbecue, which is
Okay.
different to Kiwi barbecue.
So when you say American barbecue, we've got at least 5 different styles that I know of. So I'm thinking you mean like Texas style barbecue with a good barbecue sauce.
Yeah, I'm thinking
Okay.
the really slow cooked kind of
Okay. Got it.
meats American barbecue.
And what is Kiwi style barbecue then?
Kiwi barbecue is, I'm not sure if you actually have the same kind of barbecues in America, but it's sort of a grill and you would cook steaks on it and sausages on it. There's no slow cooking of anything really involved.
Okay. So it's more of a grill than a smoking,
More of a
for
grill.
instance. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
No smoking. It's something that we would like do on Christmas with family members or at the beach sort of thing.
Yeah, no, we absolutely have grills. I've got one in the backyard. So
Okay. Yeah. There's a lot of them in parks
yep.
at NZ, so you can take your stuff along. Yeah, the Salt and Wood Collective Raumati Beach Club is a nice, close to the water, small cafe out there.
Okay.
And there is a bunch of craft beer places popping up as well. So I believe Tuatara has their main beer garden out that way. There's a couple of others that I'd have to give you names of.
Okay. And are they known for a particular style of beer? Or are we going to get the same kind of things that the beer drinkers here like? Or are they going to be more lagers, more IPAs, more what is popular in New Zealand?
There's quite a broad range, but IPAs in particular
Okay.
are pretty popular in terms of most of the craft beer places in Wellington will do an IPA, XPAs, things like that. There's some interesting combinations that you get when they collab with sort of local food places. So Whittaker's Chocolate is a really big brand in New Zealand. They're actually from around Wellington. And so Garage Project Beer that I mentioned in Aro Valley did do a Whittaker's Chocolate Stout.
Okay. All right. I have several beer drinker friends who love a good chocolate stout. Okay.
Yeah. Wellington is huge for craft beer. There's so many around. So in the central city, there's Black Dog Brewery on Cuba Street. They have a cool kind of outdoor area with like games like cornhole and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's Fortune Favours on Leeds Street. They do a really good blueberry cider. And they have a pub quiz, which is a bit of fun. You can head along to midweek.
Now, am I going to lose because it's all going to be New Zealand trivia?
Probably not. There'll be a lot of sports. You can
okay.
expect a lot of sports in a New Zealand quiz.
Yeah, but probably not a lot of baseball and U.S. football questions, I'm going to guess.
No, all rugby and cricket, basically.
I'm going to lose. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I guess that probably leads to one of the areas in the central city that's a bit of fun to spend time in is Cuba Street.
Okay.
So it's very much kind of hipster central in terms of you'll see a lot of log hair, a lot of piercings, a lot of beards, a lot of skateboards, all of that sort of stuff. If you want to buy crystals or anything like that, you could do it on Cuba Street. If you want an old school record store, there's all of that. So yeah, great place to people watch, but also tons of good cafes. There's lots of op shops. So if you want to go thrift shopping, that's the place to do it.
Got it.
And good brunch spots. So if you can kind of sit in the window and watch the world go by at, I believe Floriditas or Loretta be the two that I'd recommend there.
Okay. And I understand there's also a Cuba Street festival, so that begs the question of what kind of festivals or what day of the year should I go to Wellington?
Yeah, so, well, despite the fact that I said go in summer, August is a really good time to go because we have Wellington on a Plate festival. So that lasts for a whole month, and there's a couple of different parts to it. So there's Burger Wellington, which goes for about 2 weeks, and there's over 100 different festival burgers that get made by different restaurants in the city that you can go and try. Every year there's someone who tries to get to all of them in the space of 2 weeks and puts it on Instagram, which is concerning a little. But especially working in Wellington, it was kind of every workplace puts on a lunch trying a burger somewhere. Everyone's heading out to try the best ones in the city.
Got it.
And you get everything from your kind of elevated cheeseburger to dessert burgers, gelato burgers, breakfast burgers.
Go back to dessert burgers. Pardon me, what?
Yeah. So there's one place on Oriental Bay that's been doing one that is like a donut bun with an ice cream patty and then a slice of cheese that's made out of chocolate.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Or there was a place called Sweet Bakery on Cuba Street that made one out of cupcake and icing, basically.
Okay.
Lots of variety there. There's another that's kind of got croissant as the bun and eggs and bacon, so you can have a burger for every meal.
Got it. Okay.
There's also lots of kind of festival set menus at some of the more fine dining restaurants around.
Okay.
And Cocktail Wellington as well, where places put on cocktails that are sometimes matched to their burger, sometimes not, that you can try. And they often come with a little bit of food on the side as well, like a canapé to match the cocktail.
Okay.
So that's a great time to go. But if you are coming in summer, then each suburb in Wellington tends to put on a fair. So you'll get kind of lots of different market style stores with local producers, kind of souvenir type things, and lots of food trucks. And yes, you can kind of tour around. There's Thorndon Fair, Aro Valley Fair, Newtown is a really fun one.
And these tend to be on the weekends, I'm guessing?
Yes.
Okay.
So they'll be on a Saturday or Sunday in summer. They're spread out around the summer, so just depending when you're there. Thorndon and Newtown are the two biggest. Thorndon tends to be December and Newtown kind of in the new year, Jan, Feb.
Okay.
And then Cuba Duper, which is the Cuba Street Festival. It's been a bit less of a thing through COVID years, obviously.
Right.
But they shut down the street for the day and you get lots of live performers. There's usually a couple of stages that will have local bands performing. And all of the restaurants and cafes along Cuba Street will set up kind of a stall in front of the spot and make street food for the day.
And it did get canceled in 2022, but they're planning to have it in the end of March in 2023. So we shall see.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Excellent. Anything else we need to cover in terms of neighborhoods, things to do, side trips?
So I've covered off Aro Valley, Cuba Street area. Cuba Street has night markets every weekend as well, which can be quite good. It's mostly food trucks. There's also, so the kind of waterfront area has Te Papa, it has the theatre, Oriental Bay and all of that. I think probably the food is a huge part of Wellington that's worth maybe talking about a little bit more because it's really kind of a culinary capital of New Zealand. So there's Wellington on a Plate, which is the big foodie event of the year, but there's also some really top restaurants in the city. So the two I would mention there is Hia Kai. So that is by Monique Fizeau, who was on Gordon Ramsay's show recently, actually.
Okay.
As a kind of top New Zealand chef who does a lot of Māori and Polynesian cooking styles in her restaurant. So she's got a restaurant in the Mount Cook suburb of Wellington, which is very difficult to get into, but amazing if you can.
Okay.
So if you're planning a trip away in advance, that's worth looking into. Lots of native ingredients like horopito, things like that, lots of seafood. Just really interesting, amazing food. And then Rita in Aro Valley, which is just in this little house in the suburb, tucked away. You wouldn't know it was there, but does incredible food. It's more European influences there.
Okay.
So they're probably more like fine dining places. There's also lots of good cheap eats in the city as well. Lots of food trucks, which are really good. So Wellington has amazing food for vegetarians and vegans. Lots of people in the city don't eat meat, don't eat dairy, so there's great options. So you can even go to places like The Botanist, which is out by Island Bay, and they do fully vegetarian menu. Yeah, won't struggle for options in the city. In terms of cafes, I think Maranui is a favourite of mine, and that is in Lyell Bay, right in the middle of the beach. And it's the place Prince William and Catherine went for brunch when they visited Wellington.
Okay.
So yeah, they do great breakfast food, everything from your eggs to your pancakes to things like that.
A little more approachable than perhaps some of the high-end ones you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, or there's the food trucks. So the best place to find all of those is in the harbourside markets on a Sunday morning. It's
Okay.
just behind Te Papa in Waitangi Park. And so you'll get, lots of different options there. There's one called the Otery that does kind of fancy porridge.
Okay.
So you get like carrot cake porridge, things like that. Or lots of different kind of international influences there. So there's kind of a food truck that does Dutch pancakes and stroop waffles. You'll find fresh pasta, things like that.
Got it. It feels like we're starting to wind down. Anything else we should cover before we get to my wrap-up questions?
No, I think that's probably everything.
Okay. You were standing in the prettiest spot in Wellington. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I'm at the top of Hawkins Hill,
Okay.
which is the highest point in the city. Bit of a mission to get to, but you get amazing views out and you can see the snow on the Rimataka Ranges to the north. You can see all of the harbour, and then you can see out south towards the coast as well. It's very much a bushwalk on the way up, so really kind of peaceful, beautiful getting up there.
And bushwalk meaning there is not an established trail.
There is a trail.
Okay.
It's just through the bush.
Through
It's
the
kind of-
bush. Okay.
yeah. Yeah. There's a really good network of walking trails through the city,
Okay.
but it's not paved or anything.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Wellington.
There's a really weird art in Wellington sometimes.
Okay.
And so we had this one that was on top of the city gallery in Civic Square, and it was this hand with an eyeball on it, and it was on top of the building and looking down at everybody just for months. It was very weird.
Okay.
But then I think the cancelled fireworks was a good one as well. It was just like, we want to have fireworks for Māori New Year, but there's a whale in the harbour, so we can't.
That is unusual. That is different.
Yeah.
Excellent. And if you had to actually one more. So you've moved away from Wellington. The thing you missed most about Wellington, besides the people and the friends, is what?
I miss the food. I miss a good flat white and a cheese scone.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize Wellington in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Windy, foodie, and outdoorsy.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Kate from kateabroad.com. And Kate, if we wanted to send people to your best post on Wellington, where are we going to send them?
I recently wrote a post about the laneways in Wellington. It's a way that Wellington's similar to Melbourne in Australia, and there's lots of different laneway precincts in the city where you can see street art, get some great food. So I definitely recommend checking that one out.
And when you say laneways, I'm hearing alleys, small spaces in between blocks.
Yes, essentially. But not dark and
We
dingy.
speak a similar language, but occasionally we run into other things. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Excellent. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. And Kate, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for Wellington.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
I'd like to extend a thanks to the patrons of the show who help support the show financially. You too can become a patron of the show and find out what you can get for that by going to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. Speaking of patrons, I heard from Justin this week who said, really enjoyed the podcast about Guatemala. We did nearly the exact same itinerary a couple of years ago. By happenstance, we visited during Semana Santa, Easter week, and it was an incredible experience. In both Antigua and Atitlan, there were incredible processions over carpets people constructed in the streets, many of them designed with brightly colored sawdust. There were more people around, and I'm guessing prices were higher, but in my opinion, it was worth it. Justin, thanks so much. That's interesting to hear. And then I also heard from Simon this week about the episode on Guatemala, who said, I enjoyed your recent episode on Guatemala, not least because it reminded me of my own trips there some 30 years ago. Tikal really is one of the wonders of the world. My visit happened to coincide with a full moon, and our guide took a few of us through the jungle to visit the ruins at midnight. It was literally awe-inspiring. Though climbing up the pyramids is no easy task, as the steps are not only steep, but clearly meant for feet much smaller than mine. I also managed to climb to the rim of the Pacaya volcano, which was also a mind-blowing experience, staring into the bowels of the earth. It wasn't so active when I visited, but a guide was essential to find a path up and to make sure the wind was not blowing poisonous fumes over us. Lastly, a big yes to our guest's recommendation for Chichicastenango Market, the most magical market I have ever been to. Maybe time for me to get back there. Thanks again, Simon. And Simon, thanks so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and thanks for sharing your experiences with us. If you want to share travel experiences with me, then come with me to Turkey in September. There are still some slots available. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more